Hello, my name is Alon Simchayev. I am the Deputy Ambassador of Israel to Italy. I would like to speak today about Israel's relations with Europe, a topic that I've been dealing with professionally in the past 15 years. Europe is a major partner of Israel in many aspects. When it comes to commerce, when it comes to culture, but also history. There are historic ties between the Jewish people and Europe. We had, let's say, relations that had their ups and downs. And today, the Jewish state, the State of Israel, is an important partner, I think, of different European countries and also of the European Union. For us, for Israelis, Europe is a natural neighbor. When Israelis want to go for vacation during normal times, not during the pandemic, then of course Europe is the most obvious touristic destination. When it comes to commerce, Europe is our biggest trade partner. In the field of innovation, research and development, science, technology, we have great cooperation. Also in the field of security, those are things that Israel is doing together with major European countries. Nevertheless, I think that the current geopolitical situation gives us an opportunity to upgrade the very good relations that we have. And I'll say something about the circumstances that I think that enable us to do this step. First, there's a major change in the Middle East. With the Abraham Accords, I think that we can enter a new era in the Middle East. Israel has now peace relations not only with Egypt and with Jordan, but also with Bahrain and with the Emirates. We have the normalization agreement with Morocco. We have the beginning of our relations with Sudan. And I believe that this is not the end. And there is the possibility to initiate new contacts between Israel and additional Arab countries. This change didn't happen all of a sudden, over one night. There was a gradual process that involves Iran, because Iran is a major threat not only to Israel, but I think also to other countries in the Middle East, and I would say even to Western civilization. And it seems that many countries in the Middle East already realize that. And I think that this is one of the factors that enabled the signature of the Abraham Accords and the Normalization Accords in the Middle East. It's important that Europe would recognize that there is a possibility here for a change and that there is a great opportunity. I appreciate the support of Italy to the Abraham Accords. I think it's something which is very important, not only for Israel. I think that the importance of the Abraham Accords is that it also initiated a change in the people-to-people relations. There are Israelis that are going on vacation to the Emirates, and there is great interest from the side of the Emirates and Bahrain in promoting commercial relations with Israel. And it's important that it's not just cold peace but a warm peace. It's something that would be not just between the states but also between the people. So the Abraham Accord is the first change in the region that can also have an influence on the relations between Israel and Europe. Second issue is the issue of the gas discoveries in the Eastern Mediterranean. Israel for many years was a country with hardly any natural resources, but the discoveries of natural gas changed it. And now Israel can become an exporter of gas to Europe. There is a project that we are working on, the EastMed pipeline, an initiative to export gas from the Eastern Mediterranean, from Israel through Cyprus and Greece to Italy, eventually to Europe. I hope that this initiative would be realized, and I think that this is another aspect in which we can upgrade our relations. Another issue which is important for us is the field of security. I can tell you that lives of European citizens were saved due to the high level of the counter-terrorism agencies of Israel. This is something which is important for both sides, but I think it's not always known. And it's important that people would know that Israel has a great contribution for the security of Europe. One of the challenges that we face is the challenge of terrorism. We feel it in Israel, we felt it in Israel, and it was felt also in Europe. But terrorism comes from different directions. It can come from Al-Qaeda, it can come from Daesh, and it can also come from Hezbollah and from Iran, both of which acted here on European soil. And I was relieved to see that this thing was understood here in Europe, and that the European Union took steps against the intelligence ministry of Iran, and also several European countries took steps against Hezbollah. For example, the government of Germany that decided to ban the activity of Hezbollah in its entirety about a year ago. Additional European countries took similar steps: Lithuania, Estonia, Slovenia, and I understand that there are additional countries that are considering it. I think this is a very positive trend for the security and well-being of the people of Europe. When it comes to scientific cooperation, Israel is an associated country to the Horizon program, something that many scientists, both in Israel and in Europe, benefit from. I would say that this is maybe the most important aspect in the relations between Israel and the EU. I think it's a good opportunity for me to make this distinction that exists, unfortunately, between the relations that Israel has with the EU and the relations that Israel has separately with different countries, the bilateral relations that we have. Because while we have very good relations with Germany, with Italy, with France, with many other countries within the EU, when it comes to Brussels, to the EU, there's a certain limit that it seems that it's very hard to cross. Because a few years ago, the European Union decided to make a linkage between the relations between the EU and Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or the peace process. I think that this policy has proven itself to be ineffective because on one hand, there wasn't the positive change that Brussels was aspiring to in the Middle East. And on the other hand, the people here in Europe couldn't receive the positive outcome that they could have received from upgrading the relations with Israel. Especially now, when we deal with the pandemic and all the implications, not just in the topic of in the field of health, but also the economic consequences. This is the time where we need to see how we can promote our economies in a way that eventually would give the right benefits to the citizens. I think it's an opportunity to rethink the relations between Israel and the EU and to see what can be done. We have the Abraham Accords. There's a real change in the Middle East. We have our bilateral relations. It is possible to upgrade them when it comes to the field of economy and commerce. And maybe there is now the possibility to rethink the policy of the EU towards Israel in a way that would benefit the European citizens. I mentioned in the beginning that for Israel, Europe is a natural partner because of our common history and in many fields in which we cooperate. But I would say that first and foremost, Europe is a natural ally of Israel because of the values that we share. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and this is something that maybe seems very natural, but if you look at the course of history, and you think about where the state of Israel was 70 years ago, where the Jewish people were before the establishment of the state of Israel, then this is something that cannot be taken for granted. The state of Israel was established against all odds. We had to deal with a terrible security situation, with lack of natural resources. We had to deal with absorbing Jewish immigrants, refugees coming from all over the world. And nevertheless, more than 70 years afterwards, we can say that the state of Israel is a story of success. And the fact that despite of all the security challenges, despite of all the difficult economic periods that we had until Israel became the vibrant economic power that it is, I think that to see the vibrant democracy of Israel is something that we can all be proud of. And I think that also Europe can be proud to be the partner of Israel. Thank you very much.